Hello, everybody. This is Josh Price, and you are listening to the Mark Price for Three podcast. Each episode, my dad will be talking NBA basketball, sharing some coaching and instruction, and of course, talking about his faith. Without further delay, here's my dad, Mark Price.
Welcome back to episode 89 of the Mark Price for Three podcast. Last week was special. We were at a basketball camp. If you get a chance, go back and listen to that. Mark, how you doing?
Doing great, Aaron. Glad to be back. Our Zoom format. Last week, we had a special opportunity at the Grace Church Camp to do a live podcast. So, for anybody that missed that, go check that out. It was really great to be able to have one right after the camp and had some campers and parents there. Yeah, it was really cool, really cool. But we got through that, and now we're sneaking up on 90 next week, 90 episodes. So how about that?
Crazy. It's crazy. And there was a lot of feedback from last week's episode. I know you've answered a lot of those questions throughout this podcast, but it was kind of cool to have it all in one big town hall format. And yeah, it was a lot of feedback on that one. So if you get a chance, go back and listen to it. Not promoting our own podcast, but yeah, hey, if you get a chance, go back and listen to it. You're headed to another camp this week, right? Tonight, maybe?
Yeah, actually, I got two coming up. Actually, this week, Wednesday through Friday, I'll be in Avon Lake. And then the following Monday, I'll be in Medina. So kind of my two original camps. This is our third year at both of those. So excited to be back. Got a lot of kids coming to those camps. It's always a lot of fun. Really getting to kind of know those communities and, having been our third year there, and it's fun. They look forward to me coming, and I look forward to going. So it should be a fun week.
Well, I've had the opportunity to parachute into two of your camps so far this summer. And it's awesome, man. It's so cool to see all of the volunteers, all the people, the coaches that are working with the kids, see the kids' excitement, see your interaction. I've just had that opportunity. We haven't talked about this offline, but it's been really cool to just, kind of parachute in and just observe. And there's a lot of coaching. There's a lot of great teaching being done. Everything from last week I was watching, you guys were teaching one pass away to kids of all ages. And if a child today, basketball folks understand this, if a child today, a small child, a young child can learn one pass away on defense, man, gosh, if the kids I used to coach and travel basketball at 4th, 5th grade would have known one pass away, we could have saved a lot of time and we would have been really good. So just to praise you for what you're teaching these kids and what your coaches are teaching these kids at your camps, man, it is important, every station. So anyway, sorry for the TED Talk, but I'm really impressed by what you do. And there's a reason that these camps are very important for kids.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But at the same time, one of my keys to doing it, I wouldn't do it otherwise, is if I didn't feel like I was able to really give them the fundamentals of the game and to teach them the basics. And I mean, I know everybody wants to watch the ESPN highlights and the dunks and the, dribble behind your back 25 times. But man, if you can't dribble in front of you first,
right.
that you're not going to get to that. And so, we really drill things, particularly in the mornings of our camps. Kids work hard, coaches work hard to do a great job of instilling the things that I want taught. And so, it's great. And it allows me to interact with a new generation of Mark Price fans, because, most of the kids originally, they don't really know who I am. They obviously weren't alive when I was playing, but their parents were, and their parents did. And their, parents are doing their homework and they're showing the kids the YouTube videos, and so there's an excitement when the kids show up that, hey, this guy really did play for the Cavaliers. And, it's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool, and that's just me testifying. I've seen it, and it works. Those kids, I can't wait to see where those kids that were at your camp later in years come back and say, I attended a Mark Price camp. Okay, so that's just legacy stuff. We're going to downshift. The Cavs have nothing going on. We're not even going to talk about summer camp, because honestly, summer camp means nothing. So if a guy drops 40 in summer camp, man, great. I don't even know, but I know they got summer camp going on. I know they got some guys. We'll talk about that if, they come through summer camp. So I want to downshift a little bit. There was a big moment, and I know where you were, but we're going to title today, Where Were You When? And we're going to talk about some things that happened in history. I know where I was on Saturday night I was on I-75. I was driving home, and I actually had YouTube TV plugged into my phone because I was driving. I wasn't watching it, but I had the sound on and was listening to former President Trump's speech when the shots fired. And I immediately was reaching out to you. So I want to talk today about some things sports related, life related, world related, history related. And I'm just curious where you were when. So we're going to downshift. We're going to talk completely off the grid stuff today. But so I know where you were, but what were your thoughts about the Saturday? Saturday was a crazy day in history.
It was a crazy day. I was actually getting ready. We were with some good friends of ours eating pizza, a pizza joint, getting ready to go to a Doobie Brothers concert.
Nice.
And so, yeah, we were pumped. We love the Doobie Brothers music. So they got so many great songs. It was an outdoor amphitheater. Of course, it was, 95 degrees in Atlanta. So it was a little toasty, but we were getting ready for that. And it was weird because as we were eating, there was just all of a sudden, there was this weird kind of mumbling at all the tables going on. And I didn't, we were at dinner, so I kind of had my phone turned off, and all of a sudden I did see you had texted me. And so I said, if Aaron's texting me, it might be important, kind of thing. And so I just kind of said, excuse me. And I looked down and I told everybody, and then everybody in the whole restaurant was talking about it. And yeah, just, and we don't get into politics a lot,
Sure.
On our program.
Sure.
Because our main focus obviously is hoops and talking about our faith. But I think it does just need to be addressed just from the standpoint of, and this isn't about who you're voting for, what side of the aisle you're on. The thing that was disappointing to me in so many ways are the people that didn't like President Trump. Some of the comments like, how could they have missed? Or just atrocious, comments that, man, it just breaks my heart. And we're going to talk about the verse later, that talks about what can heal our land. Because, we've gotten way, way off track. It used to be you could go have dinner with the Democrat, or if you're a Republican, and still be friends and maybe disagree on a few things here and there. But it's gotten the vitriol and almost the hate towards the other side. And I know social media and honestly, people can argue with me and be mad at me or whatever, but the mainstream media, just what they've said about this man over the last 8 days, how they've tried to paint him to be literally Hitler. They've used those terms. It's beyond the pale. And then something like this happens, and then everybody wants to point the finger. But anybody that said those kinds of things is, you got skin in the game on this thing here, and I hate, like I said, I don't even like to get into politics, but, let's debate the issues. Let's, like a civilized society that we're supposed to be in America. That's what our country was built on, the freedom of speech. You're free to have your ideas, what your belief system is. I have the freedom to have mine, or at least we used to. I know that censorship and things, a lot of people are trying to take away certain people's opinions today. And that's scary as well. But, let's go, let's talk, let's, share our values, what the policies are that we like or dislike, and then go vote, and let's be grown-ups.
Right.
And get back to that in some form or fashion. And, I'm not going to stay on my soapbox about it, like I said, but it's just so disappointing. Whether or not you like Donald Trump or not, he's a human being who's a husband, a father, and to wish death upon somebody is just, it's just beyond the pale. And I've just been totally shocked at how unhinged some people have gotten. And man, I just, as a believer, I just pray for those people. We got to pray for those folks that they'd see the light, that they'd find the love of Jesus, because what they're hoping in, or what it is not it. It is not it. It is not going to make you happy. It's not going to fulfill your life, man. They need Jesus, and they need him bad. And anyway, End of my TED talk as well. But yeah, I just had to say that because, it was could have been, I mean,
Horrific.
talking inches away that President Trump is dead, and so it's a miracle. It's a miracle of God. I mean, people that aren't players could say, well, he just missed or whatever, but I believe we all know that, snipers don't miss that much if they're good. I don't know anything about the shooter background or whatnot, but God definitely had a hand in protecting Donald Trump. And I'm just thankful that he's alive, but unfortunately,
right.
Collateral damage, there were some people that died that were in that audience. And so, we should just be grieving over this situation, what just happened, and not bickering back and forth on, this is your fault, it's your fault. But I mean, the vitriol on both sides needs to stop. We need to discuss the issues. We need to stand up for what we believe in. There's nothing wrong with that. We need to speak what we believe and respect others, that they have the right to do the same.
Right.
And anyway, I'll turn it back over to you.
No, I agree with you. First of all, I didn't know you were going to a Doobies concert. You didn't mention that Doobie Brothers concert. So, shout out that. I probably just kept driving. I don't know if 75 gets me to Atlanta, but I probably would have just kept driving and joined you for the concert. But now, shout out the Doobie Brothers. But no, I think, this morning, a friend of mine tweeted something over the weekend, and it was a clip that is often used. It was a quote that is often used, and I believe it has been misused in regards to former President Trump. Again, this is not being political. I'm just saying she quoted that, and she's clearly where she is, and I'm clearly where I am, and that's okay. We're friends. And so I DM'd her this morning, and I just said, hey, I appreciate your post, because that's the world we should live in. It's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. And so I DM'd her, and I just said, hey, I appreciate your post, but let me clarify, just between you and I as friends. Let me clarify. And look, if I tweeted something about who I believe in or what I believe, and then she DM'd me, I have the respect for her to correct me. We don't allow people to correct us anymore.
Yeah.
Our view is the view. And as you said, again, we can get into a lot of things. Our opinion is formed by what we consume. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, what there's a million things out there, right? What we consume is what our opinion is formed by, and it doesn't make it right. And I think that's unfortunate, is I think we've allowed those things to make us experts when the reality is that may not be truth. And, the current administration a few weeks ago quoted the phrase cheap fakes. And you can have an opinion on that. I'm here for it. But they quoted this phrase, cheap fakes. Well, I mean, yeah, I think there is some element of truth to cheap fakes, and it doesn't necessarily apply to that, but it does apply to the fact that we can edit. And now we live in an AI world that you can create anything. And if I believe it, if it's what I consume, then that's what I believe. And so anyway, I shared that with her, is like, hey, one of my favorite songs is by Mike and the Mechanics back in the late 80s. And it says, we all talk a different language, talking in defense. And that's where we are as a country. And I know we're going to get into some other stuff. We're going to go through those really quick, but we're all talking a different language now because we're all talking in defense. And what if we just listened and said, okay, I don't agree with you, and then receive, not just talk, but receive and say, okay, like I get your opinion. I feel your opinion. I understand where you're at. We don't have to agree. Here's mine. And then we can walk away friends. We don't have to hurt one another's feelings. And we're just we're finishing the whole conversation with us winning. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, all right, let's jump into some other stuff. We got very deep into that. Where were you on March 30th, 1981, when Ronald Reagan got shot?
Well, I was a junior in high school in Enid, Oklahoma. Of course, back then, as we show our age, you just had the one TV and just the main channels. I think there might have been 3 of them at that time. And it was all breaking news and, just a shock to everybody because, Reagan was such a beloved figure by so many people. And of course, a lot of people are saying that, that incident, him getting shot, he went on to have one of the biggest landslide landslide victories as for president that we've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that was a situation where, because I think in some ways it was even more because we just didn't get the daily barrage, right, that we have now. I think in some ways now we're a little bit numb, like, oh yeah, I heard about that 30 minutes ago kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody heard about it at the exact same time back then, because we didn't have all the different outlets. And so everybody was just glued to the, in Oklahoma, it was 10 o'clock news at night, Central Time, so everybody was watching 10 o'clock news to see what happened to Ronald Reagan. And so it gripped the whole nation, to think that something like that could happen. So yeah, I definitely remember that one.
I do too. I barely remember it. And again, we're not showing our age, but my parents had a TV that was on a cart. Back in those days, it wasn't mounted on your wall. It wasn't 56 inch. It was probably, 13 inches, and it was rolled around the house, whatever room we were in. Like, that's where we were at. And I remember that. And there's another one here I'm going to ask you about that. I remember that on the same TV. I remember when Pete Rose hit 3,000 on that same TV. They would roll that thing all over the house because we didn't have iPads and iPhones in those days. But that's the only thing I remember about that. But I do remember being like, dang, that's crazy. So I want to move quickly. We got a bunch. 9/11. Again, we're not being sad in this episode. These are just moments in history. It's like they mark time. And so 9/11, where were you on September 11th, 2001?
Well, I was at home in Atlanta. But the interesting side story to that one to me was that happened in 2001. Mm-hmm. In 2000, I lost my father, which was a tragic. He died at 62, died of a heart attack playing basketball. I've shared that story before, but my mom, to try to do something for her that Christmas, we took my mom to New York City in 2000. And so we literally, one of the things we did was we went up to the top of the Twin Towers, and that was literally 9 months before 9/11 happened. So that one hit really close to me because we were just there. It's like we had just taken my mom. She, we'd lost my dad, had a great experience going to New York City at the time and I don't know if my mom had ever been. Yeah. And so, one of the things we did was go up to the top of the World Trade Centers, and then 9 months later, what happened. So that one hit really close to me.
Yeah. Same for me. My son was born in 2000, October of 2000.
Yeah.
So he was just a young child. He was at daycare. My wife and I were both working. And I just remember I just wanted to get home. I didn't know what was going to happen in the world. I didn't know if the world was ending. I just wanted to get my son and my wife, and I needed the three of us to be together. That was September 11th. I have a picture of him standing in front of the TV looking at us. It's really an iconic picture for our family and nothing else. And on the TV is the Pentagon, and it's, in smoke, and him looking at us. And the innocence in his eyes, I will never forget that. And then the next day, I didn't know where to even go. So I went out on our deck and I sat down and I just opened Psalms. I started reading Psalms because I'm like, Lord, help us. And, I hate that September 11th happened. I long for a world of September 12th because we opened doors for one another. We cared for each other. The world stopped, and we just like what happened on Saturday. It was a reset. And man, I hate that September 11th happened, but I wish we could get back to September 12th and the weeks that followed, where as a nation we were united because we had been attacked. Okay. Next one, Challenger explosion. And this is the last sad one. So the Challenger explosion, I was in high school, and it was that TV that they roll in with the strap on it and the VCR. And I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but in Bedford High School, we watched the shuttle go up. I don't know why. The teacher probably just wanted a day off.
Right.
So they showed that, and then we're watching an explosion, and it was horrific. Like, what just happened here? And it was crazy. So I don't know. Where were you in the January 26th, 1986?
Well, 80, that would have been that would have been my senior year in college in 1986, actually, right the year I got drafted, you know, into the NBA. And so, I didn't see that. I heard about that one. That one I'm a little less familiar with just because that stage of my life, I, didn't have TV and stuff,
Okay.
at college and things like that. So I heard about it, obviously, but yeah, I didn't see it. So that one's a little bit, foggy to me, if that makes sense.
It does. Okay, let's move on. Let's get into something more happy. Let's talk sports. You're in Atlanta. Where were you in 2017 when the Atlanta Falcons blew a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl? Where were you?
Oh man, I was in my living room in Atlanta, just so pumped up. Particularly Josh, my youngest, is a huge Falcons fan.
Yeah,
And
sorry, Josh.
it was just a slow bleed, man. I just know the fourth quarter started and they're up, and it's like, hey, we got this one. Just run the clock out, man. And the clock it's like literally the clock just stopped
Yeah.
running, and Brady just started going up and down the field, and the Falcons got conservative, quit doing what they had done all game long to get the lead. And yeah, that one was tough. That was heartbreaking. But yeah, we were in our living room, rather upset.
Well, I know where you were when the shot happened. It was in the corner, guarded Greg Hodges. So I'm going to move past that one. I'm not going to bring up the drive for anybody listening from Cleveland. I'm not going to bring up the drive because I know where I was and nobody wants to remember that. So sorry for bringing up Falcons. Here's another one. In 1987, Keith Smart hits a game-winning shot in the NCAA tournament for the Indiana Hoosiers, the same year that the movie Hoosiers came out, the same year that Season on the Brink came out. A book, like it was almost like everything was scripted for Bobby Knight and the Hoosiers. Where were you when Keith Smart hit the shot against Syracuse? And sorry to our friends Gene and Ryan from Jerseys of Hope, but where were you when Keith Smart hit the shot in New Orleans for the Indiana Hoosiers?
Well, I just got back to the house in Cleveland. It was 1987, in my second year with the Cavs. I had Laura, my wife, I had to go to the airport to pick her up. And I remember this because if I'm not, I'll have to look back. I could be off, but it was somewhere around April 1st was the game, and I was on my way to the airport to pick her up. So I was kind of listening to the game on the radio and trying to get home for the end of it type of thing in a blizzard in Cleveland, late March, early April. And that's when I realized Cleveland's different. It's a different place. But I got home. I did see the shots, did see him make it at the end. I didn't really have a dog in that fight, but that was obviously a great game. Steve Alford. Was part of that Indiana team, and that was one of Bobby Knight's deals. I mean, Syracuse had a really good team. Ronnie Cycli, I think, Raphael Addison. I don't know if it was
Derek Coleman.
Derek Coleman was on that.
Sherman Douglas.
They were loaded.
Stevie Thompson.
Yeah, they were loaded. They were
really good. Yeah, no, that was a great game. You're absolutely right. My dad was driving home from, I believe, Ashland, Ohio, in my car that I had at high school, which was a death trap. And he was driving home in that snowstorm, and I was recording it on VCR and watching every moment. I was glued to it. And that's the beauty of the NCAA tournament. I will not bring up Villanova hitting a shot against my team, Carolina, just a few years ago, which was pretty big, and they show it every time they show the montage. So anyway, I won't bring that up. All right. Next one, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa breaking Roger Maris's record in 1998. Where were you for that? Did you watch that, Chase, when that was happening?
Oh, yeah. 98 was kind of my last year in the, playing in the league. I retired in 98. But yeah, that whole chase was bigger than life. I mean, awesome. Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa. Don't watch a lot of baseball, but definitely got caught up because it was such a captivating kind of thing. And then you throw in all the drugs and all whatever it's the steroids and all the other things that were in it, and you're just like, it was made for a quite interesting story. So I definitely remember that one.
It is. It's like we all knew, but we're going to blow past that. We all knew, but here's what I love. I think again, I'll go back to this again as a nation, right? here were these two guys that were much like the Sports Illustrated article that you were in that I read back in 1980, whatever it was. Those two guys were from opposite sides of the track. I mean, they were completely different. And the way that they embraced, they didn't make it this competition. They made it a competition, but it was fun. The way those two embraced each other in that fight, like, hey, man, I'm cheering for you and you're cheering for me. And man, it was, again, I got chills. It was I got chills thinking about it. It was a special time. It was really cool. We had just moved from Cleveland to Columbus, where we still reside. We knew no one. I sat in our little townhouse, and that's all I knew to do because I didn't know where to go and I didn't know who to talk to. So I just watched Sammy and McGuire every night, glued to the TV. So yeah. All right. Last one here in this segment, Magic Johnson announces he has AIDS in the NBA. You were still in the NBA at that time. You know, the world was being introduced to that topic at the time. Where were you in 91, 92 season? Prior to the season, he had a physical, and through that physical, he found out this news. Where were you 91, 92?
I remember this vividly because we were on a West Coast trip with the Cavs, and we were playing Houston Rockets. And I was out kind of doing my pregame routine before the game. And, you know, most of the arenas have these, you know, big scoreboards with big video things playing. And they happened, all of a sudden, this big press conference came on. And Magic Johnson came out and kind of shared that he had AIDS. And I remember sitting on the scores table, looking up, everybody in the hall, everything just stopped in the arena, you know, because, you know, looking back at that time, AIDS was kind of considered a death sentence.
Right.
You know, it was just kind of new on the scene in a lot of ways. They hadn't come up with ways to help with it up until that point. And so our biggest concern was not that, hey, Matt, stepping down and not going to play basketball anymore. I mean, this guy's going to die, you know, was the thought process going through everybody's mind at that time. And of course, everybody, you know, dealt with it different. I had some people ask me some things, and some things got blown out of proportion of, you know, right, you know, you were against Magic or, you know, for him. And, you know, that was never the case. I was a huge Magic Johnson fan all the way through. I got asked, I think, maybe a question about, oh, I know what it was. When they were going over to play Dream Team or whatever it might be, or things like that. And I guess some of the other teams from other countries were concerned, you know, because everybody had all kinds of thoughts of, well, if
a lot of unknown,
if he starts bleeding and I touch him, am I going to get it? And, you know, just a lot of unknown. And I think someone asked me about that. And I said, well, I think those concerns are legitimate just because we don't know.
Don't know. Right.
We just don't know what we don't know at this point. And of course, the media, you know, the lovely media, as we all come to learn and love, you know, kind of blew that out of the smart prices against Magic Johnson type thing, which that was never the case. I was just responding to what somebody else had said to it. But anyway, I didn't mean to get into all that. But yeah, that was an interesting time. But I definitely remember where I was at that particular time. And obviously, Magic's still here and going strong. And really kind of jump-started, I guess, the treatment. Having a high-profile person like that get it really jumped up the, you know, the doctors and the medicine and all the different things of ways to try to treat it. Really, really jumped and made a big jump, and he was probably a big reason for that.
I was a huge Cavs fan, as you know, obviously. But and then you always had that other team, and you were either a Lakers fan or a Celtics fan. I think I've mentioned this before. I was a Lakers fan. I love Showtime. I could name you their starting lineups. I loved Magic, the way that he would orchestrate a game. It was just incredible. And I as a big, you know, guy that was a big guy and a point guard, because I just always loved the point guard position. Again, obviously. We've had those conversations, but I had a Magic Johnson t-shirt and I wore it that night to dinner. And I remember somebody yelling at me, and somebody literally got in my face like, man, why'd you wear that? And I was like, man, it's out of respect. Like, we're hurting today. Like I was hurting because
Yeah.
like you said, we didn't know if Magic was going to make it. And for the younger fans listening, when you see the current NBA, when a guy gets cut, they stop the game. They put on some solution on, I don't even know what that is. They wear gloves, right? Like that all became because of the situation with Magic. Back to your point, nobody knew, and we still probably don't even know, but Magic has made it this far, and so that's amazing and good for Magic Johnson. I don't know him from Adam, but always will be a fan, and that was a day that I'll remember. Okay, again, let's shift again very quickly to let's just talk about our nation. I wanted to transfer to the faith segment, and we've talked about these moments in history that we all remember, and I'm sure people listening remember where they were when these same things happened. I wanted to ask you, when you got saved, that's a moment. That's another one of those moments that you don't forget. Where were you when, to keep with the topic, the day you got saved?
I was in Enid, Oklahoma. I was a junior in high school, and I've shared my story before, but I grew up in a Christian home, and most people probably assumed I was a Christian. I was a pretty good kid. I tell people all the time I didn't smoke or chew or go out with girls that do type things. But I knew my heart, and I knew that God wasn't on the throne of my life. Basketball was, and the struggles that I had on the inside of my heart. And I remember we had an evangelist come through and did several sermons at our church. And I can't remember what he preached on, but I just remember the Holy Spirit really grabbing my heart that night, and felt like he was talking exactly to me. And that, it was time for me to step up to the plate and make that decision, that personal decision, my decision about what I'm going to do with Jesus Christ. Growing up, I think in a Christian home sometimes, I call it the umbrella theory. Your parents are strong believers. You might have siblings that are stronger believers or whatever it might be. And you kind of feel like, well, that kind of covers you a little bit. You're under that. That's my family. And so we're Christians, right? Type thing. And just, it was at that point in time, I really began to really dive into the scriptures a whole lot more before this evangelist came through. And so God was already working. I was really seeing that, what? This is about a personal relationship. It's about me and God, and what am I going to do with this son that he offered, to give me salvation. And so I made that commitment. I remember walking down in front of the church, and it was even a little bit of a shock to my parents, I think, at the time. Yeah. Like I said, I think everybody just assumed I was already, a believer. And I did believe in God, but I'd never really fully given Jesus and accepted him as my Lord and Savior and made him Lord of my life. And so, yeah, I remember that vividly. And, to my parents' credit, they loved me and accepted that. And we're just happy that, I made that commitment and got that done.
And you've talked about that in multiple episodes, what that did for your career and what that faith that you put your trust in Christ and what that's done for you throughout your career. Many times, I remember I was at a revival at our home church. Stephen Manley was the guy's name. As you said, I don't remember what he preached about. I just know I was moved, and I got up and went to the altar. I have to share a quick story because I thought of this last night. I was at Ichthus. You remember Ichthus? You remember that? It was like Woodstock for Christian bands. I
don't remember that. I don't remember.
Anyway, it was in Kentucky. It was called Ichthus. And I was at Ichthus, and it rained the entire weekend. People would camp out. It was literally like Woodstock. And our parents would take us every single year. This is after I got saved. And I usually would sleep in the tent and not pay much attention. But there was all these rock bands. And at the end, on like Saturday night, it was like the big moment. It was like a Billy Graham revival, and some guy would come out and he'd preach, and it had rained. It was like a Dairy Queen commercial for a hot fudge sundae. It was mud. I mean, it was just constant mud. And they would do communion, and they'd give you these little cups, with the little, and they did communion. And while we were doing communion, I'll never forget this, and I don't remember the date. I wish I had it, but we're sitting there, and whoever was preaching was walking us through communion, and everybody's popping their little cups and taking their bread and their grape juice. And there was a full rainbow over the back of the stage. I swear to you, I can't make this up. Full rainbow. You could see from one side to the other while we're taking communion, and it stopped raining and the sky opened up. And I'll never forget that. It was one of those moments in my life. Like, it was just God. It was a God wink. I like to call them God wink moments. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? It was incredible.
Yeah.
Like, hey, my promises are still true. And while you're taking this communion and do this in remembrance of me, my promises are still true. And I will never forget that moment at that Ichthus concert in Kentucky.
Amazing.
It was incredible, man. So yeah, those moments mark our life. And I was just talking to a friend this week, really quickly. I was talking to a friend and she was, talking about where she's going to go next in life. And I was reminding her that throughout Scripture, God tells you to build a monument. He told people to build a monument, like put a little rock pile together,
Yeah.
and we don't do that anymore. We don't do that. We don't put a rock pile together at Ichthus in Kentucky.
Right.
And we
Right.
should, because as you said, at that revival that, you were at, the revival I was at, I didn't build an altar that day, but I should have.
Right.
It's just something in my mind, and it's in there. But
Well, I think too, and we've talked
go ahead.
about before, to your point, that's such a great point. You saw those kind of things all throughout the Old Testament, but not only the monuments, but just constantly reminding, the older
Right.
people reminding the younger people, right?
Right.
Our fathers about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the stories and what they did. I mean, the same stories that we read, in the Scriptures in the Old Testament were the stories that they were verbally sharing with their children, because they didn't have it down in writing at that point. Right. So,
Okay.
and it's just a great point that, and we've talked about it before, but we have such a tendency as human beings to be forgetful, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Forget what God has done for. I mean, we talk about, can you imagine Israelites getting led through the Red Sea? I mean, you can't get more amazing than that. I can't imagine walking across the sea and just seeing the waters standing up on the side. I mean, I just can't even imagine. And then as soon as you get to the other side,
Complaining.
start complaining and build an idol for yourself. I mean, it's just that quickly, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
but so to your point, yeah, anytime we can mark something or do something or write something down or, make a plaque or something that reminds us of those significant moments that God did something amazing in our lives, just to continue to remind us that He's God, He's got this, He's in control, and to not let us be forgetful. And that's a prayer so often that I try to play. God, don't let me forget all that you've done
Yeah.
for me, Yeah. And because we are such a forgetful people.
I agree. And CeCe Winans has an amazing song. Many have covered it, but The Goodness of God. You've
Yeah.
probably sung it with
My
your choir.
favorite.
That's right. All my life you have been faithful,
Yes.
right? And man, do we forget that. And I know when I read Scripture, I read about the Israelites and I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Like, seriously. And honestly, if our story was written today and people were
yeah.
reading it, they would be saying the same thing. Like, what is wrong with you people? God has been good, and God is good, and God is true. And so let me take you to our final thing here as we wrap up. 2 Chronicles 7:14-16 says that if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear them from heaven. I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. Back to everything we have talked about in this episode. Tragic moments, fun moments, amazing moments, sad moments. We are in a place as a nation where we need to turn and we need to seek His face because He has been faithful. And we need to pray. And we need to pray that He will heal our land. We love this country. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, we love this nation, and that's why we get so passionate about it. But we need Him to heal our land, and we need to come together.
And it starts with the church.
Yep,
100%. Starts with the church. I mean, we can blame but we can say, hey, this is evil, that is evil. Yes, it is evil.
Mm-hmm.
But evil is in the world.
Right.
Those people don't know the Lord. And it starts with us. What are we as my people? That verse talks about, if my people.
My people.
God's talking about His people. That's us. Those of us who have put our faith and trust in Christ and said we are a follower of God and a follower of Christ, we got to start walking like it, and we got to start talking like it, and we got to start loving like it, and we got to start being his hands and feet. And we've just gotten way off track. And as believers, I believe in that, it's the days of, we need to go out. He said, we got to start going out and sharing truth and loving people and being his hands and feet. And, it starts with us and humbling ourselves and repenting of our sins and let God loose, back into our lives and into our country, because people, our country, not every single founder was probably a believer in our country, and that can be debated or whatever, but there's no debate. If you really go back and read the founding documents and everything, that God played a huge role in the founding of our country. And my prayer is that in some form or fashion, we can get back to those ideas and those principles. And, it's amazing. There's a lot of amazing things happening right now, whether people, there's states now that are trying to put the Bible back into the schools.
Right.
And there's so many things that we've allowed to happen to be taken out. And then you look back and you're like, well, what do you think was going to happen when you took God out?
Right.
So let's put God back in, start putting God back in, in every way that we possibly can. Because only then is our world going to get healed and America going to get healed, is through the power of Christ.
I'll close with this. You and I were in Akron, I don't know, a few months ago. We got on the toll booth, and I don't care. So we were on I-80, and there was a toll, and you were kind enough to pull a dollar bill out of your pocket. You know what that dollar bill says on it?
Yep.
In God we trust. It's still on our money, regardless of how far we have strayed, and at least for today until that changes. But as for now, the dollar bill you handed me to pay that toll said, in God we trust. And so I hope as a nation, in God we trust. And may we all just pause, pray for him to heal our land and hear from heaven. Different episode today, but thank you, Mark, for walking through where you were when. We promise we'll get back to basketball as soon as basketball gets back. But for now, there's not much to talk about. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it was appropriate with what happened on Saturday.
Yep.
And, continued also, I hope people continue to pray for former President Trump and his family during this time, because that's, I can't imagine going through that. We're watching it and we're mad or we're this and that about it. But when the shot was aimed for you, and was inches away from killing you, that's got to be, I can't even imagine what all the different emotions that their family's going through right now. But most of all, just thankful that he's alive, and we need to continue to pray for him, because I would like to say, okay, that's done and over with, but there's a lot of crazies still out there. So we got to continue to pray for God's protection.
100%. And prayers to the family. I love that there's a GoFundMe or several GoFundMes that'll never replace the people, but the story of the people in their heroic efforts to guard their family. And maybe that's our next episode, is how that dad shielded his family. And I love that our nation, that's who we are. That's who we are.
Right.
They are responding, and that's all we can do is respond, either financially or with prayer. You don't feel financially, that family will now benefit from how our nation has risen up and are taking care of that family. So it is episode 89. We're on 90 next week. We're coming up on 100, which is crazy, but good luck at camp this week. Thanks, Mark, for taking time to walk through it. Where were you when? I'll talk to you next week, episode 90.
All right, Aaron, look forward to it.
Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Mark Price for 3 podcast. Remember to subscribe, like, review, and share. I'm Josh Price, and we will talk to you again on the next episode.